Have you ever stood on the ground, looked up at a giant airplane like this one, and wondered, how does that even work? How does a massive, heavy machine full of luggage, food, and hundreds of people stay up there without falling? A massive aircraft, built from tons of solid metal, stays suspended through a precise set of physical laws. It is a story told through the mechanics of the sky. To solve the mystery, we first have to rethink what we are looking at, because that sky up there, it is not empty space at all. Even though we cannot see it, air is everywhere. It is a physical, heavy substance that fills the sky and surrounds you right now. It may seem invisible, but air is very real. It constantly pushes against objects, sometimes with incredible force, even when we don't realize it. Airplanes do not float in a vacuum of nothingness. They are specifically built to use this thick ocean of air to push themselves high above the clouds. The first tool airplanes use to interact with the air is their wings. Their specific contoured profile allows them to harness the atmosphere as they move. This is a diagram showing a cross-section of an airplane wing. Notice the specific shape. The wing is carefully curved on the top, while the surface underneath is much flatter. This deliberate curve changes how air moves around the plane. The air traveling over that curved top surface has to stretch and move faster than the air passing underneath. Because the air below is moving slower, it pushes upward much more strongly against the flat bottom. We call this upward pushing force lift. But there is another force at work. Gravity constantly pulls the heavy airplane downward toward the Earth. For the airplane to rise into the sky, that upward push of lift has to become stronger than the downward pull of gravity. There is a catch. Wings sitting perfectly still do nothing. They cannot create that lifting force unless air is rushing over them very, very fast. That is where the engines come in. The engines provide the massive forward push required to get the air rushing over those wings. This forward pushing power from the engines is called thrust. But just like gravity fights lift, there is a force fighting thrust. As the plane speeds ahead, the thick air pushes back against the metal to slow it down. This resisting force is called drag. So flying is really an invisible four-way tug-of-war. Thrust fights drag to keep the plane moving forward, and lift fights gravity to keep the plane up in the air. You can see this tug-of-war in your own backyard. Think about what happens when you throw a folded paper airplane. The paper's shape helps air flow around it, creating a little bit of lift. But a paper airplane lacks an engine, which means it has no way to make its own continuous thrust. Without that constant forward push, drag quickly slows the paper down. As it loses speed, the air stops rushing over the wings, the lift disappears, and gravity simply pulls it to the grass. A real airplane stays up because its engines never stop working. You need a continuous source of forward thrust to keep that tug-of-war perfectly balanced. Let's put all of this together and look at a real runway. Here is where those four forces meet in real time as a plane prepares to fly. The engines fire up. They generate an immense amount of thrust, completely overpowering the drag of the air and pushing the heavy machine forward. The plane races faster and faster down the pavement. As the speed increases, more and more air rushes over the curved wings, building an invisible upward pushing hand. Gravity is still pulling down with all its might, but then comes the breaking point. That split second when the upward force of lift finally grows larger than gravity and the heavy machine pulls away from the Earth. Humans didn't invent this process, of course. We watched birds use wings and air to overcome gravity long before we ever built machines that could do it. But engineers learned those rules and applied them on a massive scale. They designed the entire airplane, the exact curves of the wings, the sheer power of the engines, to maintain this delicate tug-of-war, even high in the sky where the air is much thinner. Seeing a plane in the sky is witnessing a masterpiece of balance. Every flight relies on the consistent, reliable physics of moving air. Airplanes fly because fast-moving air, powerful engines, and four perfectly balanced forces all work together to keep them in the sky.